for coming. I'm in Victoria today, just across the street from the legislature, where we should be getting ready for a fall session to deal with the effects of the pandemic on our society, which are profound. Instead, we find ourselves on the election trail, campaigning to get the attention of British Columbians when they are preoccupied with their health and with the state of their economic future. So how did we get here? Well, clearly, John Horgan decided to serve his own interests rather than the interests of the people of British Columbia. The concern is that it didn't have to be this way. We now know that John Horgan met with Sonia Furstenau, the leader of the Green Party, last week, that she said that he would have her support and the support of her party for another year under their confidence and supply agreement. There would be no confidence vote, that they could not be guaranteed to win for another year. And we also have to look at the issue of the Horgan government having passed the fixed election date legislation to provide for an October 2021 vote, and John Horgan knowingly decided to break that law. So what's going on here? It appears now that John Horgan was clearly scheming to trigger an election that is totally unnecessary. And it's time for John Horgan to tell the truth. British Columbians are tired of being toyed with. They're tired of being gamed with about how this came to be, because it's totally up to John Horgan as to how this came on. We didn't want an election. The Greens didn't want an election. The people of British Columbia didn't want an election. But John Horgan thought that there was some tactical advantage for him and his party. So what do we have? An election that nobody wants. Let's remember, not long ago, the Lieutenant Governor and the NDP Health Minister were complimenting all the parties for their collaborative approach to fighting the virus. That was a few weeks ago. And now John Horgan says he's the victim of an unstable government? That's ridiculous. There is no instability in Victoria other than John Horgan's instability in deciding to call this election purely for his own purposes. We're now facing very difficult times. And we as the BC Liberal Party will be putting out an exciting agenda in the days to come. We're looking forward to getting our plan in front of the people of British Columbia. We'll start with getting more people back to work. We want to make it easier for mums and dads with kids to get the daycare they need so that they can get back to work. We want to deal with the terrible toll of addiction in our society, because it is not acceptable that we continue to have these staggeringly high overdose death rates and these communities that are unraveling because of the ravages of drug addiction. We've got to deal with the homelessness issue, which is related but has a number of different causes in addition to addiction issues. And we've got to get confidence back in the people of British Columbia. We need to restore confidence in the people of this province that they can get ahead so that we can jointly rebuild BC. That's what we'll be bringing out in the next week or so in some exciting policy ideas that we hope the people of British Columbia will be attracted to. Because like it or not, John Horgan's forced us onto the campaign trail, and all of us are starting to wonder, can you trust John Horgan? Is he actually telling you the truth? We're going to find out. So thanks for listening, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thanks, everyone. So we will go ahead and take questions from the line. Everyone has the opportunity for a question and one follow-up. So we will go ahead and start off with Lindsay Tynes from the Times Colonist.
Well, hi, Andrew. Can you hear me all right?
Oh, yeah.
Yep. I'm just wondering, you mentioned dealing with homelessness and addiction, which is a big issue here in Victoria. How would you tackle that differently than what the current government is doing?
Well, we're going shortly after this up to Paul's restaurant up on Blanchard Street and also to Dodd's Furniture to get an eyeball view of what's going on. I was up there about 6 weeks ago, and it's turned into a mess. What the NDP have done is pay far more than the market price for old motels, move people into them, and then basically abandon them. So these people who are struggling with their own issues, whether it's addiction or mental illness or just basic homelessness, are now just abandoned by the NDP rather than providing any kind of sense of purpose and hope and opportunity. As we say, and coming from my medical background, first of all you treat the causes, and by that you prevent the harm. There are many different causes, and they're going to have to be addressed in a very thorough way, because homelessness is an issue all over our province now, and it can be addressed, but not by just putting people in a warehouse and walking away, which is what the NDP do.
Yes, the Liberals were in power for years when many of these issues existed, and you had big surpluses at that time. Why didn't the Liberals address those issues then?
Well, as a matter of fact, we did. When we were in office, we put together 30,000 housing units, especially for people who were facing challenges in life. We provided supportive housing. We provided rental assistance. We provided rent payments for people. And that was a more effective way of doing things than what the NDP are doing, which is basically warehousing people. So we think the NDP are entirely on the wrong track on this, and we think there's a better way. We've also got to deal with the ravages of COVID, which have a complicating effect here, but it's not working right now. We can see that all over British Columbia. There's a better way to deal with homelessness, and we're going to have a plan to do that.
Great. Thanks, Lindsay. We'll go to the next question. It's Andrew McLeod from the Tyee. Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, hi, Andrew. I'm wondering if you were to form government, what you would do to improve long-term care.
Well, I think we're on a trend line in long-term care that I was pleased to see came up in the Federal Throne speech. In different parts of Canada, the standards for long-term care are widely variable. I've seen this myself, having practiced medicine in Nova Scotia and in a number of places in British Columbia. The goal is to get everyone in a private room. There are occasional circumstances like married couples who would prefer to be in a joint room. But in most situations, we've got to look forward to an era when we can guarantee our long-term care will be in private rooms. It's not going to happen right away, but we're going to get there if we can, working with the federal government.
Do you have a follow-up, Andrew?
Yeah, sure. There have been calls through the pandemic to change the ownership model, and in particular concerns about the effect of the profit motive. And I'm wondering what your take is on that.
Well, there's a wide range of models of long-term care across Canada. Some of them are entirely state-run and operated and owned. Others are owned by government and operated privately. Others are entirely privately operated. So let's back off and decide and diagnose exactly what the concern is. Let's do the analysis and figure out where the issues are and figure out if the ownership model has anything to do with it. But let's not jump to conclusions and say that there's a magic way to solve problems by having everything owned by the government. That's not a sophisticated or thoughtful way to deal with it.
Great. Thanks, Andrew. Next question will go to Rob Buffum with CTV Vancouver Island.
Oh, hi, Andrew. I'm wondering, in your view, what is the singular defining issue of this election campaign?
Well, I think to our surprise, it's turning into trust. We've seen John Horgan basically mislead the public about why we're having this election. We've seen him double-cross his coalition partners, the Greens. We've seen him break the law that he passed. We've seen him contradict the Lieutenant Governor and his own health minister about how things were going in the legislature. Is he telling the truth? This is turning into a pretty core issue in this first week of the campaign, and most of us like to think that it's the job of the Premier of the province, especially during a pandemic with an economic crisis on our hands, to be telling people the truth about how we got here. Instead, we're getting this mixed up, politicized line of half-truths that really doesn't tell us what the whole story is. We need to move ahead as a society. We need to move ahead together on the pandemic. Our goal is to make British Columbia a better place for everyone, not just to make sure it's a safe place for John Horgan and his cronies to work.
Do you have a follow-up, Rob?
I do, thank you. Yeah, just circling back on Lindsay's question, I'm wondering about the homeless situation in the Victoria area. Victoria City Council has said that they will allow 24/7 camping, basically daytime camping, so long as the state of emergency exists in the area. We've all heard recently that it's expected the pandemic's going to last perhaps for a year or longer. In terms of a solution to the situation there, what are your thoughts? If you formed government, would you try to end 24/7 camping, or would that be there to the end of the pandemic, do you think?
Well, one thing I think we all understand is the pandemic, the virus, the illness, the disease is the same worldwide. It's a virus that kills people and causes a lot of grief and misery and injury. That's a standard everywhere you go, and certainly across Canada. In terms of how people fall into homelessness, that varies across Canada, but in British Columbia there are a few pretty clear reasons: mental illness, drug addiction, people who simply are down their luck and have run out of money. So let's figure out what the causes of that homelessness are and deal with them in an organized fashion. Having a hodgepodge of rules, depending on which municipality you're in, makes no sense at all. So it requires a multi-government approach where people are going to be thoughtful about it and address the underlying problem. Just like I say with homelessness, let's treat the causes and prevent the harm.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Rob. Next question will go to Richard Zussman from Global News.
Andrew, I just want to get back to some things you said yesterday in Surrey. You mentioned that the NDP has stalled out on the hospital. They point out that the Liberals sold off the land there, and they have actually acquired land, done an assessment, and are moving forward with the project. You mentioned the NDP stalled out on transit. It was the Liberals who held out transit with the referendum, and the NDP delivered the money that's now leading to Surrey's SkyTrain. So, did you guys fail the people of Surrey? Like, what is your counter to clearly what you were trying to mislead people yesterday in those comments?
Well, let's be clear about the BC Liberal record in Surrey. $550 million for the Guru Nanak Hospital Centre, $250 million for the Jim Pattison Pavilion. SFU Surrey was built entirely by the BC Liberals. The money that was taken from the land in southern Surrey was put into building the massive new engineering faculty buildings at SFU. So value for money is there, real projects, real results. That's what BC Liberals offer. Let's talk about the NDP record in Surrey. Taxis, trucking, the hospital, the Massey Bridge to replace the tunnel, SkyTrain extensions, you name it, there's nothing. There's talk. There's nothing more than talk. And the people of Surrey have to be very wary of an NDP government that is saying they're going to build a hospital when that's exactly what they said on 12 different occasions through a 10-year span in the 1990s, and they never touched the Abbotsford Hospital. We built it in 3 years. So we're a party that gets things done because we believe in results, not in rhetoric and political nonsense.
You have a follow-up,
So
Richard?
you didn't get the hospital done, and you didn't get transit done. So I'm confused about how you can say that they failed on those things when those weren't completed.
Well, I worked at Surrey Memorial Hospital in 1985 as a young doctor, and it's a dramatically different place now because of BC Liberal investments. As I said, a $580 million treatment pavilion at Guru Nanak, the $250 million Jim Pattison Pavilion for outpatient care. That is a massive investment of almost $1 billion in Surrey, along with the SFU campus in its entirety. So we get stuff done. And we all know that transit expansion has been incremental. It went first to the Evergreen line in Coquitlam, which is done under the BC Liberals, and now it's time to complete the transit expansion into Surrey. As has been said before, in 1986 there were 4 SkyTrain stations in Surrey, and in 2020 there are still 4 SkyTrain stations in Surrey. So what are the NDP doing with the money? They're going to put $1.4 billion into changing a 4-lane Patello Bridge into a 4-lane Patello Bridge. It makes no sense whatsoever. So let's invest in Surrey in ways that actually show results, just like we did at Surrey Memorial Hospital and just like we did at SFU Surrey.
Thanks, Richard. Next question will go to Rob Shaw from the Vancouver Sun. Go ahead, Rob.
Well, hi, Andrew. There was another person who was found injured in Strathcona Park in Vancouver today, and I know that you're looking at Victoria area kind of homeless issues today, but what would you say to the people of around Strathcona Park who have especially been vocal about feeling threatened and violence and intimidation because of the encampment there, and what would you do as Premier on an issue like that?
Yeah, I go through that area regularly when we're in Victoria to go back and forth to fly here, and it is changing for the worse. And I think we've seen that in downtown Vancouver as well. We've certainly seen it in the north end of Victoria, where I'll be going in about an hour, where there's suddenly this street phenomenon of people who are out of control. We've heard the stories of toddlers being assaulted. We've heard the story of random stabbings. We've heard the stories of assault rifles full of ammunition being found in the back streets of Strathcona. Something bad is going on, and it's got to be addressed by us as a society. It's not a matter of saying, well, it's somebody else's fault, there's nothing that can be done. That's not good enough. People want results, whether it's the people here in Victoria dealing with Beacon Hill and the Burnside inhabitations, or the people in Strathcona who are dealing with this enormous tent city in the park. People didn't move into those areas. People don't try to conduct their way of life expecting to have it so massively disrupted. So this calls for a response from every level of government, whether it's the throne speech today from the federal Liberals or whether it's municipal governments. There's a lot of work to be done. But let's be clear, we have to address homelessness jointly, and we have to address this growing wave of crime that's starting to fill the news every night. This is not good enough, and it needs to get fixed.
Do you have a follow-up, Rob?
Yes, thanks. And then I know you're speaking to some businesses in Victoria today, but if you can expand your message beyond that to other businesses in Vancouver as well, what would you do to help a business that is suddenly found to be dealing with crime and deaths and issues because they're close to either homeless camp or a government purchased facility to house the homeless? What would you propose there?
Well, I went to visit a florist shop and a number of small little cafes on Granville Street about 3 weeks ago, and their lives are being torn apart because the NDP bought an old motel, moved a bunch of people in, and have provided no support or guidance whatsoever for those people. They spill onto the streets. There's open drug use. There are people leaving needles in the back alley. There's open defecation on the street. This is not good enough. We as a society have to address these things and not just say, oh, there's nothing that can be done. We have to address the complex problem of homelessness. We have to address the complex problems of addiction, and I think there's a better way to do it.
Great, thanks. Our next question will go to Binder Sajan from CPD. Go ahead, Binder.
Hi, Andrew. I'm just wondering if you can clarify your remarks on Surrey policing and what the Liberal government would do there if elected.
Well, I gather today that the NDP are trying to throw some blame off their own backs in terms of the growing chaos around Surrey policing changes. What I said yesterday was there's a real trust problem that's broken down. There's been a complete lack of transparency, and this NDP government has refused to engage with the people of Surrey on this issue. They've ragged the puck on it for 2 years, and now people don't trust any of the decision-making because they really don't know what's going on. The Surrey policing situation calls for transparency, it calls for openness, and it calls for a rebuilding of trust so that a sensible decision can be made. And the NDP have just abandoned the issue and are hoping it'll go away.
Do you have a follow-up, Binder?
I do. Just on the issue of trust, how do you expect voters to trust you and the Liberal Party, but you specifically when you were at the cabinet table for a lot of the decisions that were made around rising MSP costs, around affordability issues, and child care spaces and the crisis that we've seen in recent years?
Well, I'm proud to say I was at a cabinet table where dozens of hospitals were built around British Columbia, where advanced education was a top priority and numerous facilities were built around the province, where it was possible to get ahead and where we had a society that encouraged enterprise. Right now, we're in a real pit because we've got the COVID problem at the front of the line, and we've got a real problem with the lack of a sense of hope and purpose. We have to reestablish that sense of optimism in British Columbians. We've got to give people confidence. We've got to have a government that gives them hope so that we can start rebuilding BC. And it's going to take a long time because these deficits are going to run for a while, but we know that we have the job of making British Columbia better for everyone, and we know that British Columbians are up to this task.
Great, thanks, Binder. We have time for a few more questions. Next question will go to Justin McElroy from CBC. Go ahead, Justin.
Hi, Andrew. I was wondering what your reaction to the new overdose numbers announced today is, and how your government would handle the overdose crisis, specifically given the fact I know we've spoken a lot already about homeless people dealing with mental illness, but 60% of overdose deaths in BC this year have been inside a private residence.
Justin, you're bang on the point. We have addictions and overdose nightmare in British Columbia. There's some of the worst numbers anywhere on the continent. And there are many different things going on. As you pointed out, the majority of the overdose deaths are youngish males dying alone in their home. These are stories of despair, of needless addiction. We're going to have to address the issue of treating addictions by providing a pathway to get off drugs. We have to start talking about prevention with things like prescription monitoring programs that will avoid people getting addicted in the first place. These are commonly used around the world, and we have to get on top of this in British Columbia to change the trajectory we're going in, which is a very bad one.
Thanks. Do you have a follow-up, Justin?
I do, and I regret to say it's follow-up on something completely different, but I was wondering if you could comment on, you said in your UBCM speech that you would be unveiling, quote, very provocative environmental policies over the next few days, and without spilling the beans, I'm just wondering if you can give more details and, why they might be provocative.
Well, we're looking at a change in thinking about things like energy in British Columbia. We have to move into a new kind of way of life after we get through this COVID epidemic. And it's going to be an opportunity for us to redirect ourselves in some ways. And we're going to open that conversation in ways that I think people will find quite exciting. We've fallen into a bit of a rut now with COVID. We're thinking, can we just get back to where we were? And the answer has to be, once we get through COVID, we have to get to a better place, to rebuild British Columbia, to restore confidence so that people have something to look forward to in the future of BC.
Great. Thanks, Justin. We've got time for one more question. Last question, I'm going to go to Ian Bailey from the Globe and Mail.
Mr. Wilkinson, just about the Surrey Police Force, what would you, if the Liberals win government next month, what will you do about this police force? Does it go ahead? Does it not go ahead? You've talked about lack of trust, but what happens if you come to power?
Well, the first thing is to get the facts on the table. The lack of transparency has been a serious issue because we've had an NDP cabinet that has been toying with this thing for 2 years, and the people of Surrey really don't know what's going on. So factions have formed, people have become distrustful of each other. It's become a hyper-politicized issue, and it shouldn't be that way. This should be an issue that is addressed in a methodical way with a lot of transparency for the public, and that would be our priority.
Okay, sorry. A follow-up question. I'm trying to squeeze two questions in here. So would you start the process from scratch, or would you stop the clock? Would you do that? And as a follow-up, I wonder if you have any comment on something completely different, which is Dr. Bonnie Henry's remarks about being the subject of harassment and death threats.
Well, I think it's obviously a concern when we hear someone who's put heart and soul into fighting off an epidemic like Dr. Henry, and then we hear that some people are disparaging her, insulting her, even threatening her. I mean, come on, people. We've got to move into this together. We've got to beat off this virus together. It's up to us to win as a society and as a people. And rubbishing and insulting the people who are trying to lead the way from a medical perspective is just plain wrong.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Ian. Thanks for everyone's time. And for those of you on the line we didn't get to today, I will follow up with you directly. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.